Good afternoon. I'm Steve Lowry, the editor of the High-Low here at the Long Beach Post. Welcome to Live Chat. Today we have with us Peter Kareiva. Peter, welcome. He's the new president and CEO of the Aquarium of the Pacific. He joins us from Seattle. Peter, thanks for coming along.
Yeah, I'm excited about coming down to Long Beach in a few weeks.
We will be happy to have you. If you're watching along right now, as always, we welcome your questions, your comments. Go ahead and send them along and we will pass them along to Peter. Ask what you want about the aquarium, where it's going, how it's standing up during the pandemic, his background, all kinds of things. Peter, I want to begin there. You took the job. You have an extensive past when it comes to environmental organizations like the Nature Conservancy. Why did you decide that the Aquarium of the Pacific was a good place for you right now?
Yeah, lots of my friends are asking me that because they probably didn't see it happening. So I've worked for the federal government in fisheries, so West Coast conservation of fish. So the aquarium is a good match there. I've been a researcher, at universities all over the world, and my first entry to science was as a marine biologist. Took a research cruise, down to Venezuela. So my entry into science was through marine biology. So it's a good fit there. And then at Nature Conservancy, of course, we did conservation all over the world, including marine. Few people realize Nature Conservancy is the world's largest marine conservation organization. So scientifically, I've always been there, but I was at the I left the Nature Conservancy and came back to the university because I wanted to teach and be in a diverse city. I thought the environmental movement is happening in cities. That's where it's going to take roots. It's not in suburbs. It's not in wealthy, affluent areas. It's cities. Cities are where the environmental movement is, and UCLA is a great university for that. It's fabulous, but even UCLA is restricted in, not a lot of people don't get into it. Mm-hmm. It's, in a way, it's proudly elitist. It's hard to get into. Mm-hmm. Aquaria and museums and zoos are platforms that are open to everything. And I got to know the aquarium because Jerry Schubel, the president for the aquarium for 17, 18 years.
Yeah.
So Jerry, right after I moved here, I knew Jerry I worked for NOAA too. So I worked for the federal government. And I knew Jerry from that world. He and I were on a science advisory board for NOAA. And when I moved to UCLA, he started inviting me for his evening series, where they were really sort of public engagement, and I liked it. I mean, it was real engagement with a community, that just were there because they wanted to be there. Yeah. And then I taught a small little class at UCLA. There's a group of 7 graduating seniors who are doing research, and for some reason I can't remember why, but we came to the aquaria. I think probably Jerry invited me down, and 3 of the kids started just beaming about this experience they had. They were Latino, and they just, it's like, it's sort of where they discover biology. And so it's just, I'm no longer a really high-powered researcher. I still do research. I'm very analytical, and I will still very much be engaged in science. But in many ways, I think we know enough scientifically for many of our problems. What we really need to do is connect with the public, engage with the public. So many of the issues are public goods, public decisions, and what better place than the aquarium? It's an exciting place.
Yeah, and Peter, looking up some of the talks you've given, which by the way are very entertaining, you've, I'd say, scrutinized the environmental movement at times for not messaging as well as it can. You have a speech from about 9-10 years ago where you say people just want to believe that we're simply being outspent by the other side, and that isn't necessarily always true. We do spend a lot of money. Our messages, though, aren't always the best. You point out that in some survey, I forget what it was, when people were asked about an environmentalist, they say, well, it's a nice person, but I wouldn't want to invite them to a party.
I remember. So that survey, you're exactly right. That was a survey of high school kids all around the country. And it was when the Nature Conservancy had recognized that it, you know, like the environmental movement has been very white and tended to be affluent, and it's older.
Yep.
And they realized demographically that's not the future. And so they started doing these focus groups and surveys, and that's what it was revealed from. And I think the actual quote was, she's blonde, she's white, she's really nice, but she's not really fun.
Now, how do you, so like you say, you've got the science, how do you get it to people so it's palatable and it's something that people can take in and say, okay, I can get with this?
Well, because, you know, there are so many issues that are divisive, that, you know, for religious upbringing or cultural upbringing, you might not be able to bridge a gap, but nobody wakes up in the morning and says they want to destroy the environment. Nobody does. Even you know, the caricature of some greedy, I mean, they just don't do it. You're a businessman. I mean, and most people, you know, when you teach, you learn that, you know, teaching, often you need professionally good teaching evaluations. Best way to get good teaching evaluations, take them to the intertidal of the beach. You know, it's just, I mean, it's just like an automatic winner. Either that or talk about, you know, primate behavior and sex or something. But so it's innately, people are pro-environment, and you have to recognize that. And you can't, too often the environmental movement's been painted as jobs or the environment. That's an example, right? Development or the environment. That's a crazy division. That's an absolutely unnecessary and crazy division.
Right.
The environmental movement should have never let that happen.
Yeah.
Never let that happen. They shouldn't have been so gloomy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun, you know, right?
Yes.
It's fun.
Is it tough to when you're talking about environmentalism specific to the ocean? Is it more difficult to get people to care about something that many people fear, number one, and that remains a mystery even to scientists themselves? Most of the ocean hasn't actually been even explored. Is it harder to get them to care about that than a beautiful lion that you can look at and say, oh, how majestic?
Well, you know, probably on a television screen it is. You know, so if you know, or you know, computer screen, the lion might be more engaging, but the mystery of the ocean is a big deal, you know. And you want to think of aliens, it's marine life, invertebrates, jellyfish, squid, those are alien. I mean, you know, science fiction. And the thing about the lion, I mean, so yeah, it probably is in the way that a lot of the way humans connect with nature is through these charismatic animals. It's why porpoises and whales are such a big part of people loving the ocean. But when you go to this is where aquarium, when you go to the aquarium, you can get within, you know, 6 feet of a pretty bizarre and cool organism. That doesn't even happen at a zoo.
Right.
That does not happen at a zoo. And so if you can, and the diversity, you talk about diversity, the number of, you know, anemones, squids, octopus. I happen to love octopuses. They're so smart, and, you know, they're as smart as a 5-year-old kid in many ways. Seahorses. I mean, you know, a seahorse, they marry for, well, they don't marry. They mate for life. They're monogamous, and the male broods the kids and gives birth, the male. And so, you know, and you can go to the aquarium in the Pacific, but you can go to almost any aquarium and literally even be 6 inches to a foot from seahorses and watch them.
When we're talking about taking this kind of lead when it comes to protecting the planet, learning about the planet, we tend to talk in global terms, but we have a question here from someone who said, how can the aquarium partner with the city of Long Beach on some of these kind of measures going forward? Have you, by the way, have you met with any city officials yet, or is that?
No, I hope to have some set up as soon as I get down there. It's, you know, as you know, COVID makes everything hard in terms of scheduling and getting around and so forth. But there's one big way. remote learning and kids going back to school, and it being and I know the Aquarium does a pretty good job with their academy and their online videos and courses. And I watched a few right after I agreed to take the job. I got online and watched a few, and their docents, they were good. They were engaging. So I think the Aquarium can be very engaged in providing material that will enliven remote learning, really enliven it. For when I was at UCLA, we had a grant from Boeing, and we made a number of short 3 or 4 minute videos to engage in Title I high schools for science and STEM education. So that's another reason, actually, I was drawn to the Aquarium. I love that work. I mean, I loved doing that work that Boeing had funded. Yeah. So certainly, I mean, it's a no-brainer with schools. I think because even when you can't go inside, the Aquarium has this outdoor facility. It can provide a place for kind of controlled field trips. That are still, what do I remember from when I was a kid? A field trip.
Yeah.
Right. And they're not, you're not just running wild. It's outdoors. You can keep your distancing, but there's still something cool going on. So for education, for sure, I think for convening and just being a place where people, Californians, I think, identify with the ocean, the beach. I mean, it's a coastal state.
Yep.
And so many of the issues, everything from the port and the pollution from the port, but also the economy and the challenges of the port, fisheries, climate change in the ocean, sea level rise. It touches everybody.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. We have another question. You're quite popular, Peter. It says, do you have any thoughts on natural capitalism and how we focus on the outcome-based versus goods-based economy that fills our oceans with trash, chemicals, alters nature? Is there a path to discuss economics at the Aquarium?
For sure. So the natural, there is a project that's based out of Stanford called the Natural Capital Project. I was one of the founders of it. That was the premise of it. The premise of it was nature, a healthy nature, has value, and it's real value. It's food, it's recreation, it's shelter from storms, so that intact marshes and eelgrass beds and reefs reduce storm surge a lot when a storm comes in. So the whole premise of that project was, when you're polluting, you're actually damaging a valuable asset, not just to environmentalists, not just to somebody, who just loves fish or loves dolphins or loves whales, but to a system that supports the well-being of people. And we wrote a book. I edited a book on it, and that is for sure a dimension of the ocean and the shoreline. 37% of the world's population is coastal. So, just for them, it's clearly important.
Speaking about economics in the Aquarium, a couple months ago, we did a story with Jerry Schubel, and Jerry said that it cost about $2 million a month to keep the Aquarium simply running, just to keep it running. And that 75% of the revenue comes from people coming in and buying their tickets. Right now, you can only go outside. Those spots are very limited because of social distancing. So when you show up for work your first day, I believe August 3rd,
right,
that's the first thing that's going to hit you in the face, obviously. How are you feeling about that? Are there new things you can do, or can you just kind of batten down the hatches?
Well, you should never batten down the hatches. That should never be a response, whatever it is, pretty much. But, I'm just learning about it. I do calls as much as I can. I still am pretty kind of embalmed at UCLA in doing my responsibilities there. But I've been talking to Jerry and his team, and we do have to think about, just like every place else, they've had to furlough some people and cut staff, and it's very painful. And that's a tragedy of this that's kind of unavoidable.
Yeah.
But, I think this sort of educational material has value, but it has value. We can't be selling it to schools. I mean, it's got to be free to schools and students. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we ought to be, philanthropy plays a big role, especially as government steps back, philanthropy steps forward. We ought to be able to get corporate sponsors, or like Boeing sponsored those videos I told you before, corporate sponsors or philanthropists to say, we can't lose these kids because they're not being taught effectively for a year. We just can't.
Yeah.
And places like zoos and aquarium and museums that have hands-on exhibits, that can really engage the kids. You can bring kids of whatever age group you want into the aquarium to have them do something, but film it and do things. So I think that has to be monetized, but importantly, not monetized by charging schools or the public, or the students. We got to find some other way to do it. Beyond that, I think there's a real role for the aquarium. I don't know if this can turn into money, but it might turn into some corporate and business giving. One of the projects that I work with at UCLA that is a natural fit to the aquarium is called Blue Prosperity, or the Blue Economy. A lot of talk about it.
Yeah.
About how much money is in the oceans, huge, trillions of dollars. Yeah. But for that research project, I've been looking at in small islands, the Ted Waite, Gateway fame, funds that. He loves the ocean. And we're looking at aspects of the blue economy for small islands that really will help development.
Yeah.
And I think the aquarium is a good place to do that. That particular project really focuses on small islands in the Caribbean and the Pacific. From the aquarium, you could focus on, major nations, California for that matter, and be very engaged with the blue economy. So
Jerry Schubel, your predecessor, was significant in that he took the aquarium from this kind of tourist spot, and he really added this element, not only of education, but advocacy.
Yes.
And we have a question here saying, basically talking about how do you build upon what Jerry kind of started there at the aquarium, and asked, what are the things kids and visitors are going to need to learn about moving forward when they're coming into the aquarium, once they're allowed to come back into the aquarium?
First of all, Jerry's a really hard act to follow. I've changed jobs a lot, and I've been lucky enough that when I've changed jobs before, never follow somebody as great as Jerry. So, and I mean that sincerely.
Somebody who's really bad at their job. Sorry, yeah, go, yeah.
But
Remember that, kids. Yeah.
So I think I think it speaks to the aquarium as a place where you can showcase diversity, cultural, ethnic diversity, in the scientists, in the important historical figures and artists and cultural engagements of the ocean, because they're there. So that's obviously an issue in the nation right now, but in the world. And the ocean is a public good. And environmental justice and sort of just social justice is a public good. You can't have a gated community in the ocean, right? And so the ocean demands the public to come together. It actually demands it. It's not owned. It's not fenced. It's a public good. So I think it could certainly serve that role. I think California is going to be facing, when people look at technologies in response to climate change, there's like several hundred of them that people like to explore and think about. Nobody's doing the ridiculous thing and saying, I have the silver bullet. So nobody's doing that. But there's explorations of lots of different economic and technological innovations that can reduce our emissions or capture carbon. The ocean is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Aquaculture and maybe even ocean engineering and so forth. The ocean is certainly one of them. And a lot of the ocean activities do not require big, giant infrastructure. They're what is called granular economy, which means they produce more jobs, they learn faster, and they have more equity. More people have access to them compared to some, and they can happen fast compared to, rebuilding the whole electric grid.
Mm-hmm.
Or in Saudi Arabia, having this giant solar collector. So I think the coast and the ocean is going to be part of our response to climate change. And it's going to be part of the response that really serves equity and jobs.
You mentioned social justice just earlier, and we talked about this before we came on. Is there things that the aquarium can do to reach out specifically to the Black community, whether it's to do with staffing at the aquarium or to bringing in Black youth, Black students to get a better hold of what the ocean is, what it holds for them? Is there outreach that can go on?
So the aquarium already has a terrific docent program where it brings in volunteers, and that is very diverse. If you look at it right now, I asked Jerry about it and in these videos. So that's a place where you could do it. And I think they're doing a pretty good job of it. I think the way it can be ramped up a little bit, and we did this at the Nature Conservancy. We had a program called the LEAF program. I forget what it stood for, but it took high school kids. It was run by Toyota. I mentioned these companies funding things. They're funding things because, like, Boeing needs engineers and scientists. Toyota does as well. So they're supporting education for STEM, science, technology, energy, engineering. So what I think we could do with that docent program is make it very much a college prep program. And that's what we did, at the Nature Conservancy. We actually took those kids. They did work. They did real work. They weren't docents. They did a lot. Docents do work, but these kids were building fences and, pulling, really getting dirty work.
Right.
But we took them to college campuses, and we made that program a mentorship program. And I think we can. Maybe the aquarium already does it, but I think that's, and as I said, I know that they're very, very committed to recruiting diversity for the docents, and that shows just in the data, but making that like a college prep program, which I have some experience with from the Nature Conservancy. And it's one of the other reasons is when you're an educator, like I have been all my life to some extent, there's periods where you can intervene and make the greatest difference. It's high school and middle school.
Yeah.
And as you get older, less so.
Peter, we're almost out of time. I wanted to ask you, you start on the 3rd. Will you actually be coming to Long Beach? Will you be doing it? You will be.
Yeah, my son's birthday on the 3rd, so I'm coming down that night, and then I hope to be showing up at the facility Tuesday.
When you meet with your staff, with everyone there, there's no doubt you're a terrific person, it seems like to me, but there's no doubt there will be some anxiety. There's anxiety, I'm sure, right now, just with the economic factors. In speaking to the people who are working at the aquarium right now, what is going to be your message at this moment in time, which obviously is a time of, right now, a lot of uncertainty?
I guess that we're a team and we care. One of the nice things about, another reason I left a university to come back to something like the aquarium is and this is really true. It's not just the Aquarium of the Pacific. It's I've been calling up aquarium directors around the country this week just to get their experiences. Is that the people that work at Aquaria, they share common values and they feel like they're really part of a team. And that's pretty cool. They're not competing with each other. And it's to really, say that recognizing that, we'll do the best we can to take care of you and to find a way, to somehow find a way to not just survive, but thrive. And I think we can. When I was at the Nature Conservancy, shortly after I got there, was the recession in 2000, I think it was 2007, 2008. And we had to lay off 25% of the people. And it was, and we made a real effort. So even if somebody lost their job, to go find them, something else. And I think there is that commitment in this community. The aquarium is a community.
Yeah.
It's a community.
Yeah. And as you'll find, Long Beach is that way too. It's a very small, big city. So people tend to care about everything in the city. And the aquarium, of course, is just a huge point of pride for the city.
Yeah, when I've been there, I just like the energy of watching people go through it. I mean, it's sad we can't see that energy, but
right.
It will come back. I mean, with certainty, that will return, and that energy is amazing.
Peter, thank you very much. We really appreciate you. This went really, really fast, by the way. Appreciate. Well, hopefully we'll see you when you're down here.
Yep.
All right. And again, thank you to everybody at home. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your questions. They were great. I'm not sure what subject is tomorrow, but I'm sure it's easily as fascinating as this. Or, how could it be? But it'll still be good. Anyways, thanks very much for tuning in.
Right.
Peter, thanks again. Thanks again. Good afternoon.